Hi guys, welcome to a new episode of the Genre Report. Today I'm going to be talking about Sam Raimi's newest film, Send Help. I saw this movie, so now we're going to talk about it. So let's roll the intro. This video will contain some mild spoilers for Send Help. Send Help is a fairly straightforward film to contextualize. Linda, an underappreciated executive played by Rachel McAdams, and Bradley, her arrogant Nepo baby boss, played by Dylan O'Brien, are the only survivors of a plane crash above the Gulf of Thailand. The pair wash up on a remote island, and suddenly the dynamic that they had in the office appears to be reversed. Linda shows herself to be the competent and practical survivalist, while Bradley is a sheltered and helpless patient with a badly wounded leg. Now he has to begrudgingly rely on the generosity of a woman we have seen him repeatedly mistreat. On the surface, this falls into one obvious generic category, the survival film. Often this genre deals with the fallout of some disaster that leaves our protagonist stranded without hope of rescue. Films like 2000's Castaway and 2015's The Martian both portray a lone survivor relying on their own resilience and ingenuity. You can argue that this category originates in Greek mythology with the Odyssey. Though some films with multiple survivors, like Apollo 13, follow this pattern, usually these multiple survivor stories will use the premise to examine questions of social dynamics once the artifice of modern power structures are stripped away. The best-known example of this version of the survival story is William Golding's Lord of the Flies and its multiple adaptations. In this story, a plane full of British schoolboys are trapped on a remote island with no adult supervision. The desire of the boys to maintain a sense of order and civilization gives way to a fierce power struggle on the island and a descent into brutality, which reads as a powerful statement on society and human nature, and an especially resonant one in a Britain that had so recently claimed to be civilizing other parts of the world. An exploration of how social structures are replicated in isolated environments can be seen in films like the 2010 Western survival film Meek's Cutoff and 2023's Society of the Snow, which dramatizes the 1972 Andes air crash. The most well-known example of this type of survival story is the ABC adventure drama Lost, which ran from 2004 to 2010. Its initial premise deals with the challenges faced by diverse survivors of a plane crash, and while ultimately its focus shifts to different generic elements, at its core are characters redeeming themselves with a new start in a new place. This isn't Sam Raimi's first foray into survival films either. Though his early work, especially the Evil Dead films, is primarily associated with horror, the first two films of that series are set in a remote cabin in which university student Ash Williams, along with his friends and fellow survivors, have to survive not only the hordes of animated deadites, but the possessed natural environment that seeks only to kill them. This isn't strictly a survival film in the same way as these others, but it does have a concern with survival against natural elements and with isolation creating vulnerability. As the director of horror and horror-adjacent films, a recurring theme in Raimi's work is the frailty and resilience of human bodies. In Evil Dead 2, Ash amputates his own hand and equips it with a modified chainsaw, showing both these ideas in tandem. In 1990's Darkman, Peyton Westlake is disfigured by a laboratory explosion, but the subsequent treatment gives him super strength. Green Goblin in Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man himself in Spider-Man 3 are all victims of experiments gone wrong or freak occurrences that enhance the capabilities of their bodies while simultaneously warping their psyches. The parallel vulnerability and resilience of the human body play a pivotal role in Send Help. Linda rises to the occasion multiple times to a superhuman extent, while Bradley is immediately demonstrated to be vulnerable and in need of care. They both continually exploit each other's human frailties, repeatedly abandoning, attacking, tranquilizing, and poisoning each other. A telling example of this is a scene in which Bradley poisons Linda in an attempt to abandon her on the island and escape on a raft. Tellingly, this portrayal highlights their reverse dynamic, rather than restoring the old order of the office. Here Bradley ends up nearly drowning and having to be rescued by Linda. As she performs chest compressions on him, the poison in her system causes her to violently vomit on him as she saves his life, using his own betrayal to humiliate him. This is inversely proportional to their office personas, which place Linda as meek and unglamorous, while Bradley is fashionable and supremely confident. The visual language of the film explicitly resembles archetypes we recognize, so that we understand what is being stripped away. If the artifice informing our perceptions of these characters is obvious, then that's the point. Artifice and performance play a large role throughout this film. When Linda makes her play for promotion in the office, it is framed around getting recognition by the men in the office for her work, rather than simply wanting the job itself. This isn't to criticize the character, much of her position is defined by the presentation of status. This remains important throughout the film. Linda rejects Bradley's posturing of still being her employer when cut off from all the things that gave him power in the office. She refuses to replicate the same structures she lived by before entering the survival film. This brings us to another sort of frailty, the frailty of age, particularly regarding female aging and female beauty. Linda is certainly no master of the office politics, but it is heavily implied that she is disregarded at least in part because of the dismissal of a woman in her 40s by men who find her unattractive. Just to be clear, this is not a comment on Rachel McAdams, who is obviously very beautiful. And even if she wasn't, that wouldn't matter because she would still be Rachel McAdams. However, in the eyes of many characters within the narrative, she is invisible because they find her off-putting physically and socially. Once she gets to the island, however, she radiates with a new power that comes from being recognized as necessary. There isn't a full physical transformation, there are no facial prosthetics or fat suits to make her look unattractive, it's Rachel McAdams after all, but instead it's a subtle shift in performance and cinematic choices that complement her new status. Unlike films like Death Becomes Her or The Substance, I don't think Send Help is overly concerned with perceptions of female beauty, but it is an unspoken element that informs their dynamic, especially when we meet Bradley's statuesque fiancée, Zuri. Perception, however, is key throughout. As I interpret the film, it is less about Linda being a hyper-competent survivor than it is about her finally being seen by someone as having value. Her success is meaningful because it disproves Bradley's dismissal of her. Just as Bradley performed his role in The Office, Linda is performing her role as a capable survivalist for an audience. This reading is compounded by Linda having learned how to make herself self-sufficient in hopes to get on the TV series Survivor, and that she turns her experiences into a new career as a memoir and self-help author by the end of the film. I really enjoyed talking about this movie. If you'd like to see more, please remember to like, review, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.